Okay, the last session, so sad, but we'll do it. What I want to do today is immunology and endocrinology. Now, endocrinology is on your YouTube, and that's me on the YouTube. And if you've watched it, it's a lot to it. It's an hour and a half. And I'm going to try to go over some of the stuff I'm going to tell you, the stories I don't tell on YouTube. But for the review of the systems, you can review on YouTube, that one I gave you. But let's do, immunology is not. So let's get that one over, and then we'll end up with endocrinology. And I have, if I have some minutes, I want to go over some last minute clinical things. So, until 1983, all we knew about immunology was that we got vaccinations. And because we knew that we could get something that made us immune to that illness. And all the particulars I didn't know, and you probably didn't care either. I didn't really care. I just had to have them. And so 83 is a point of reference because that was when the AIDS, this peculiar, people were dying of this peculiar problem, and it seemed to be involved with the immune system, which of course we now call AIDS. And that's what really got the study and the money poured into the study of our immune system and what a system it is. And I thought it was an urban tale, but people tell me it isn't, that the airline steward, who they said had probably 1,000 partners because he was with Pan American Airlines, so Pan meaning all over. So he was on those world flights and had partners and had homosexual relationships. And they really, and as I said, it sounds so urban tale, but people that know about AIDS, they know that's really, he really spread it, the virus. And but was it around? Yes, it's been around a long time. And now what I'm telling you is you might could find another story. I have tried to dig in. The best I can find is they do think the first even idea of the virus was in the green monkey in Africa. And they don't know how many years the green monkey carried it. I mean, he is kind of green. I mean, I've seen his picture in HIV books. And so then how did it get to people? And the best they can come up with is, and again, this is one theory, is it was pretty much located in Africa. And Haiti used to be the place to go for especially American gay people, because they could vacation without judgment. And so a lot of vacationing, when Haiti was beautiful. It's not, if you've been to Haiti now, it's not so beautiful. They kind of burned it up and ruined it, but with their because they needed to, they thought. Anyway, it's not that beautiful now, but it was. And so what did gay people have to do with that? Well, the Haitians, this is what they think, the Haitians would seasonally go over to Africa to work and then come back. It was kind of a migrant situation. They could, in the bad months at Haiti, they could get over to Africa and work. They think that they contracted the virus in Africa, brought it back to Haiti, and then then it was gotten. The virus was gotten by American homosexuals. How did they get it from the Africans? dyes in clothes, the virus it's not so strong, but it's pretty viable. And they say that the Africans would make dyes and dye clothes and stuff, and the virus would be in them, and then Haitians would buy some clothes, take them to Haiti to give family or whatever, and the virus got spread. I did this lecture at school one time, and it was one of my students, a grown man. He didn't care for me, and he went to administration and said, and I didn't say it, but I guess he thought it, and you can think it. He said that I was telling everybody, and it was in a Catholic school next door, that people were having sexual intercourse with the monkeys in Africa. And of course you might think that, and maybe they were, I don't know, that isn't what I said. But yes, that went to the top, that I was teaching beastology or whatever with green monkeys and humans. I don't know if it was going on, but I'm sure not saying that. But there was that part of the dyes and blood. And some people even said they had some rituals where blood was exchanged, or blood was brotherly rituals where the virus might have gotten transported.
It still goes on today.
The rituals?
Yes.
Okay, so
there's some new bloodborne diseases because of
it's because of the rituals.
Yes.
Yeah, so see, and that's good to know. It may be still then that kind of thing, another kind of virus.
Right.
Whatever, it got into the homosexual community. And that's why did it get in that? And they are thinking because of that connection with Africa. The big deal is not so much how it got going. Of course, if we could get, and then Christine, you probably have ideas too, because Christine's really into global and worldly things.
I'm thinking about Ebola right now. I don't know if you all have been aware of the Ebola crisis in Africa, but this all ties in. They all have similar stories of origins.
See, similar stories or origins, yeah. So anyway, we get a virus, and as we say, others are creeping up, and what do we do about them? But this particular virus is what got America to start really investigating, and it was around the early 1980s. And so, the bacteria, we know what the body does with bacteria. And let's go through the fate of bacteria. You get it. You can get it through your mucous membranes if they're thin, and you're worn down. Your membranes are more thin, so it's easy for those strong bacteria to get through our membranes. Broken skin, bacteria. So we know what happens. You get bacteria in your bloodstream, and the body is just so wonderful. As soon as it hits the bloodstream, then our system, our body recognizes that we've got something foreign and doesn't like it. And our 5 white cells, those wonderful 5 cells, white cells that fight, are alerted. Something in the system that shouldn't be there, and we've gone over that. All 5 go to it and recognize it's bacteria, and 4 of them back off. And the one that fights bacteria starts working with phagocytizing. That doesn't work. Remember, we've been over that. The heat if phagocytizing doesn't kill, and you never even knew you got the bacteria, then the body will work as hard as it can. But if you're worn down when you got that bacteria, it's going to be hard for you to kill it. And so this to me is just fabulous. The body alerts the brain. We're not winning. And the brain starts heat. And I think we went over how I want you to love fever. as far as not fight it so, because it's the body's way to try to help it. So heat, interleukin-1, I think it is, this chemical release that gives us heat and tries to kill. So we've got phagocytizing and we've got heat. And so you may never, it's gone. You may never have known it. If the bacteria is so strong, it just is multiplying so fast and your body's down and not fighting good, then you get sicker and sicker, and that heat is higher and higher, and you usually go to a doctor, and nowadays you might get an antibiotic. And that's the fate of the bacteria, and we know that. And you might, that old thing, you may think you're sick, I feel a little sick, then by tomorrow you're fine. It could be that phagocytizing and just that little bit of heat was enough to kill the bacteria. What a beautiful system we've got. But it's a little different with a virus, and we know HIV is a virus, but put HIV off to the side, or Ebola, or any of them, or the ones we don't even know that are out there. But let's just take a regular virus, and we know that we have no antibiotics that will really kill them. We know, we talked about drugs that might make the milieu, might make the neighborhood hostile, and that would make it die. But nothing we have really kills a virus. So the fate of a virus starts just like it did with the bacteria. You get it through your mucous membranes, you get it through breaking skin, and it gets, so far it's just like bacteria. And so as soon as it gets into the system, the immune system, the 5 cells, something's foreign, and rushes to the area, and this time lymphocytes. The other 4 back off. Isn't that fabulous? The body recognizes it. Lymphocytes start phagocytizing, because you remember lymphocytes fight viruses. So the lymphocytes are phagocytizing and phagocytizing, not getting anywhere. Ask the brain to please send some heat. Let's see if we can kill it with heat. And that works fine. If that works, you're great, and you probably didn't even know you had a virus. Same thing so far as the bacteria. But this one, you're not winning. You didn't with the bacteria, but we got an antibiotic. You go to the doctor, and the doctor can't tell if it's bacterial or viral, your fever or your problem. And so they will do the differential, the 5, to see which one is highest, and tell whether it's viral or not. But, so let's say lymphocytes showed up and it's viral, then you've got to, they'll give you an antibiotic even if it's viral, because your body's so down fighting, it's so easy to get a bacteria. So a lot of times you get a prophylactic, doctor may not say, I'm giving you prophylactic antibiotic, even though you've got a virus. But they do it just to keep the bacterial from starting in a low resistant body. So let's say that here's what the virus does before you go find out it's a virus. It does the phagocytizing, it does the heat, and like we said, it might be that 12-hour virus. I'm all right, I had a 12-hour bug, because it lasted about 12 hours. Well, that was probably either one. It could have been either one. But if it's a virus, the fate of that virus is so different from the bacteria fate. Here's what happens. Those 5 went to the area, and the lymphocytes are doing their thing, and heat's doing its thing, but then we have T cells, and that's something that didn't work. We didn't use T cells with bacteria. The T cells come as 4. Now, and you don't have to learn and always know about all 4 T cells. But they come as, the article I ever read that made the most sense said T cells will go to the area because they know there's a problem too. If it's a bacteria, T cells back off. If it's a virus, they call it the commissioner, helper T's. Look at the problem. They know it's a virus, and to make it very elementary, the helper T's take a picture of the culprit, and take it back to a computer, which is our lymphatic system, and put it in the computer, put it into the lymphatic system, and our computer lymphatic system runs a test and says, she had this same thing when she was 4 years old. Let me send the antibodies. Let me send something she's already made to fight it. And so antibodies go along with viruses. So the virus is here. Helper T noticed, took a picture. The lymphatic system said, we have some antibodies made up. And do you remember when we were talking about hematology, I told you that if you bled out, your antibodies do like an ostrich and go into your bone marrow and hide, so you don't lose them on the concrete in the blood, your antibodies. You're just as immune as you were before you lost blood. So you've saved your antibodies. Some circulate in the blood or some hide until they're needed. They come out, that antibody fights in 12 hours, your little bug is over, which meant you probably had some made up for that same virus. What if that picture goes to the lymphatic system and the lymphatic system says, oh, this is new, never had, but I'll make an antibody. And so our lymphatic system makes an antibody, but it takes 7 to 10 days for, I say, if I meet the Creator, why did it have to take so long? So you're living with the virus for 7 to 10 days while it's being made. I don't understand that, because it seems to me instant is better, but it takes 7 to 10. So the cold, the common cold, you know, I don't care what you buy over the counter, it's going to take about 7 days to get over it. And that's because it's a virus. And the viruses, they say, we'll never have a vaccine for colds, Kathy, because Kathy has a bad cold. We'll never have a vaccine for that because there's so many different viruses. And so, 7 to 10 days for the virus to run its course. Now, it can't keep going rampant. And so we need to do our part, but the body does so much. It doesn't just let that virus keep multiplying. We've got other things trying to fight it. We've got killer T's, the other number 2 T's. Killer T's are kind of like a spoke of a wheel. They're detonating. They're putting chemicals on that virus. So we got helpers that took the picture. Killers are going to start working with chemicals on it. They hadn't made an antibody to kill it, but they're trying with chemicals. And then when the antibody's made, then we've got antibody fights. It's 7 to 10 days, antibodies fight, but they keep fighting, and something tells. Literature says we have no idea why the body all of a sudden quits pouring out the antibodies, because you think about it, if we're overloaded with antibodies, we got problems. We've got suppressor T's, and suppressor T's stop, as I said, literature says nobody knows when the body knows to quit, stop, you've got it under control. And then the memory T's. that reminds, she had this when she was 4 years old, pull them out and use them, those antibodies. Those antibodies, other than the antibodies you got from your mother in utero, they don't last but 4 months or something. They don't last forever. And the ones you got when you did breast milk, those, you got some antibodies from your mother in utero, you got some antibodies from your mother in breast milk, but they don't last forever. And so, but those that you get when you make your own stay with us forever, for the most part. Never say never, but they're supposed to stay with us. The virus is handled a whole different way, and the bacteria, you say, well, you had to add an antibiotic that we've made. Well, the body, I think, again, the Creator needs to talk, but I think the body was made that it could handle a bacteria. And then we've gotten so many bacteria that are so strong, and we don't take care of ourselves too good when we get sick. We still go out and fight wars and kill people and do all things when we're still not great. I do think if we had a bacterial infection, now I'm going to take an antibiotic, don't worry about it, but if all things being perfect, when you get a bacteria, if you stop what you're doing, get the rest, get the diet, your body should be able to take care of itself. It doesn't, because we don't necessarily do so good on that, in that area. And so praise the Lord, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1929 and helps us along with penicillin. But the virus, we just have got to rely on some of the antivirals that make the area hostile to life, and our beautiful immune system to make antibodies. So gamma globulin that we talked about in plasma, you know, we've got water, albumin, gamma globulin, and fibrinogen that are 4 aspects of our plasma. And gamma globulin is antibody already made to help us. So I used to say this, y'all are the first class I've changed it. Edward Jenner in the late 1700s, and he's the one given credit, and I'm just so chagrined that he shouldn't be given all the credit. But I used to until today. Edward Jenner in the late 1700s, smallpox was rampant, and it was no respecter of persons. Royalty had it. Everybody had it, and you know, it's just sores, and then they scar such that you look burned, because it's a bad case of it. You just look like a burned victim when the scabs are gone. Milk maidens that would come in that milk cows would come to him, and he had noticed that they had smallpox, and he'd say, "You've got smallpox," and they said, "No, because we've had cowpox." And what they had come up with, the milkmaids that milked the cows, they would get something that looked like, but the cows had it. They would catch it from the cows, and it was sores that looked like smallpox. But in their community, they realized none of them ever got the dreaded. They didn't scar like everybody else. And that's what made Edward Jennings say, they wonder what this is about. So he did his own experiment and took purulence from the sores and put it into a 8-year-old boy. I used to say it was his son, and I've gotten bits and pieces of different stories, so I'll tell you the latest one. But I had heard he put it in a in the skin of an 8-year-old. And he didn't get, the child had a bump where it happened, but he didn't get the dreaded smallpox. And so he came up with the idea, if you get just a little, something must happen to the body. Like the milkmaids got a similar illness, and something about that, well, you can figure out yourselves, the body made something to fight. And so he came up with the idea that if you got just a small dose of the bad, then you would be, now we use the term immune to the real bad. And he then wrote papers and did great, and he's known for it. And he deserves, the reason I had always heard of Edward Jenner doing this, discovering the cure for smallpox, he named the procedure vaccination because vacca is Latin for cow. And so, and that's how he first got his epiphany. Well, I read this past summer, and then I read it again last weekend, even deeper, that the year 1000, and Edward Jenner did this late 1700s, 1000, the Turks took the crust of those sores, and they took the crust and put it in people, scratched, put the crust in, and they had discovered that in 1000. And then an American, and you can look him up, I meant to bring his name, it's like Boylston, Boylston, but if you look, smallpox in America, and he in 1721, so he was before Edward Jenner. Jenner got the claim because he had published and stuff. The Turks didn't publish, and then the American didn't. So it was known that you could get a lesser problem, which we know what's happened. The body didn't need the whole wham, just a little bit, and the body made antibodies. They didn't know that's exactly what's happening. We do, though. And then Dr. Jenner, Edward Jenner, that did incidentally, the American, I got it straight this time, the American inflicted his 6-year-old son and 2 servants. That's what it says. So I've gotten little bits of stories all together. Anyway, the lesser, and you build antibodies. Dr. Jenner, Louis Pasteur. It was Louis Pasteur who, in 80 years later, after Dr. Jenner, and so for 80 years people knew in the 1800s of this vaccination that really kept that smallpox down. So Pasteur was working with the dread illness of cholera, and so he went off for the summer and left the agar dishes in his lab, and they dried out. So he came back to work, scraped the cholera that was dried, and put a solvent with it, and injected chickens, and they didn't do anything. So he thought, well, must have been a real low dead. Whatever was in the agar dish of cholera was dead. So he got fresh cholera substance and put it in the same chickens, and they didn't get cholera. So now Dr. Louis Pasteur said, it wasn't lesser. I gave him just as much as should have gotten him a blown case of cholera, and he's the one that came up with another angle of vaccination, that you could still have the exact cell shell, but not all of the goop and loop inside. But if I can just do a design of it, the body will make antibodies. He doesn't say it that way, but that's in essence. And you know yourself, we have some vaccinations that are live, that are just a little bit. And some of our vaccinations are a design or the shell of the real thing that makes antibodies for us. You know, now we've gotten this wind. One of the doctors at church today, I don't know how we got on it, because I didn't bring up that I'm of all this. But he was saying on vaccine. Oh, I was telling him about a family I know that are into no vaccinations. Farmer Todd and all his products. You know, one of that group. Sounds like I'm making fun of them. I'm not. But you know, there are people that are really earthy. And I was talking about this earthy family to this doctor, and he said, and I said, they don't get their children vaccinated. Now, if y'all don't, that's fine if you don't. But, you know, your child's healthy because we got vaccinated. So, yeah, and so that's great for you to have your principles, but it's because of us your child doesn't have it. Anyway, he said, and you know the first case of tetanus in the country was in 30 years was in the state of Oregon last week or something. And he said, what people don't understand, tetanus is going to be with us forever. It's in the dirt. It's going to be with us forever. And so it reminded me that when I'm at camp, I'm always with a doctor now. And, you know, they're not working that hard. We're on the front porch rocking when children aren't around, so I get to pick his brain. And he's written chapters in immunology books, big in Atlanta or Birmingham, I can't remember. But we talk about immunizing because, of course, he believes in it. And I said, you know, people are so concerned about antibodies so overloading our bodies. And I get that, and I'm inclined to ease into, I think, until I talk to him. Because you know, they say that all our thyroid problems are because of so many antibodies in our body that we've made against things that we're exposed to, and then we've been vaccinated, and now the vaccinations that children are getting from pediatricians is so multiple, just so many. And I think, is that really good for the body to have all these antibodies? So I get to talk to him about it. And he said, and I'm going to try to tell it right, because he told me that 2 years ago and I couldn't remember the data. He said that if you take all your immunizations from birth to 18 years, he said, we've got it now till you get about 150 antibodies. He said a cold, when you have the common cold, you build up thousands of antibodies with that common cold. He said the HIV, not that we want that, but he said it will multiply about 230,000 a day, antibodies. And he said, we're talking about immunizations, 150. He said it's gotten so out of kilter. And Christine, you probably know how out of whack all that is.
Yes, I do. And I have some good thoughts.
All right. Share them.
About it if you
Yeah.
don't mind.
Uh-huh.
I like to take medicine and read it into the relational world. So health and disease for me, I see it significantly linked to the way we behave with each other. And so you brought it up when you were talking about war.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get these invasions, you know, these invasions, these viruses, they invade and it begins a war. And our bodies focus tremendously on war.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we do in society? Our budget for the United States of America is 70 to 75% given to the military.
Given to military.
Military, we put 75% of our money, our tax money goes to war and goes to war tactics. So you see how that relational aspect
Yes.
it connects to the body and how the body reacts as well.
Right.
So for me, what I see, and this is seeing how we can do that with our, it really begins with the individual's thoughts. How you decide you're going to deal with the situation. Are you going to deal with it by fighting, or are you going to deal with it by sitting down at the table, communicating, and creating a peaceful understanding? One of my big mantras is understanding brings peace. War doesn't bring understanding, it just brings a lot of destruction. Like Haiti, something that was so beautiful.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
So I don't know if you can follow what I'm trying to say, but it really is pretty simple. It comes down to it. It's just a matter of us being able to see it and being able to say, oh, so this is what we've been sort of constantly causing for ourselves all this time. Think about our budget, what we could use. 75% of our government budget goes towards war and concept of war and you know, fear of war. So what can we do if we stop fearing war and actually, what can we do with that money? And maybe we would tax some, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe our taxes would go way down if we could just give up this idea of war and come to the table with a different.
And it's so insidious, the whole
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I like this one. I like to, you know, see what's going on in the body and pull it out.
Yeah, yeah.
And see it in a relation. That's close.
Yeah. So if the body does that great with the fate of virus and the fate of bacteria, what happened with the virus that we're talking about, the human immunological virus? Of course, they're not sure, or we'd have a cure. It varies. It's the one thing in nursing that varies a lot in ideas, and I think I try to stay up on it. But here's what they say. Everybody's fine to say that the virus, the HIV, is betrays our immune system. That is a perfectly perfect statement. It betrays. Our immune system gets betrayed by this virus. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. There's something about this virus that makes it stop doing what it should do, breaks that chain. And here's what they say happens, they think. You got the virus, your body does fine, but if it's the HIV, if it's that virus, you got it. And to give you an idea, and I may have already told you, the period on your paper has 230 million viruses in it. So if it's got that many viruses, you can imagine how they get into the bloodstream so easily. Sexual intercourse. You know, even if somebody's abrased vaginally or rectally, and intercourse happens and there's the slightest tear, well, 230 million went in that little tear. Because if a period can have that many, so you see, and one virus is all you need to be positive, to have it in your body. So you get the HIV by it entering the bloodstream. However it entered. Did it enter vaginally? Did it enter rectally? Did it enter through mucous membranes? A torn...
Transfusions a long time ago before we tested.
Exactly. It got in the bloodstream. And so, well, how do we handle viruses? The 5 ran to it. The lymphocytes said it's a virus, back off, I'll take care of it. Phagocytizing happens. The heat happens. And helper, all the T's are beginning to not wake up. Helper, they say helper T, the one that takes the picture. This article I read said they call it a police commissioner. They never shoot, they never hit, they never kill. They just surveillance. So helper T gets close enough to take the picture. But what happens is the betrayal. This article tried to be real graphic, but understanding, they said it betrays you. It joins the helper T. They kind of magnetize. and helper T doesn't get back to the computer. Now, obviously he does, because we have antibodies of the HIV antibodies. That's what tells us we're HIV positive. So they say it's kind of an attraction. It's a breakdown of that system that worked so good for helper T to take the image back and make an antibody. But this article said a few do break away. They've been injured, but they break away enough to struggle back to the lymphatic system and make some antibodies, but not good enough to kill the virus itself. And so that person stays HIV positive for life, because they did have a few antibodies got back, but not effective. That magnetism stays together, that antibody amount stays active. And I use Magic Johnson, the basketball player. You know, he was HIV positive, and he had a young baby and his wife who did not test positive, which probably meant that her mucous membranes had no tear. You know, her mucous membranes never got his virus. Now, I'm sure, I know the sexual activity of Magic and Cookie Johnson, but I would think there's a lot of safe intercourse with them because of his carrying the antibody. So a person can be HIV positive, and what then makes them die of AIDS? And intellectually, people would say, well, their health goes down, their resistance goes down. It's easy as we get older, everything doesn't work quite as good. So the strength and the pull of the lesser antibodies, radiation, high medicines. Maybe you were sick, you're HIV positive, but you were real sick, and it was a strong medicine. And the article I read just said, it may be something that just traumatizes that magnetism, and the break happens and the virus just goes rampant. So, will you die of AIDS? And I used to say, probably if you're HIV positive, you will die. I don't now, because I'm convinced you can live a long life and be HIV positive. And you need to be healthy. You need to take your health in your hands. But you can live a long life being positive. But it does, the virus breaks away, for lack of a better way to say it, if you get full-blown AIDS. And I know that I'm getting full-blown AIDS is they have about 40 symptoms. The only ones I think are truly, because fatigue, they're those kind, loss of appetite, they can be lots of things. But the three that, if you told me you thought you had AIDS, if you had those three, I'd probably go along with you, rather than anemia and fatigue and all those. You'll have them maybe, but the three are Kaposi sarcoma, K-O-P-O-S-I-A, Kaposi. Kaposi sarcoma is, it's a cancer, but it soars. And I say that it's a lot like radiation. And I don't tell a physiologist, but to me, and then to get them everywhere, mouth, and to me, it's like radiation. They get a sore, and that sore just goes deeper and deeper and into the bone, and the bone's exposed. I've seen it in the mouth. It'll be a sore, and it just keeps going deeper. It's almost like radiation, but don't tell anybody I said it that way, but that's what it looks like to me. So it goes kind of deep, and so it's a cancer that, so Kaposi sarcoma, pneumonistic pneumonia. Now that's one that people say, now don't say that everybody that has pneumonistic pneumonia, that type of pneumonia is AIDS. It's AIDS. And I'm not. So I'm telling you, you can have pneumonistic pneumonia and not have AIDS. I don't ever see anybody with it that doesn't have AIDS, but it's supposedly you can have it and not have AIDS. And the other one is a kinesis, a shuffling of your feet. It's a shuffle. If you see an AIDS patient and they've got a neuropathy, it hurts and they kind of shuffle. To me, those are three top things that really distinguish AIDS as AIDS. Your T cells, I should add a fourth one, your T cells really drop. Well, what should they be? I think T cells, don't write, yeah, you could write down. If your T cells are under 200, it's not a good thing. I'm thinking T cells should be 7 to 1400. Now, I'm thinking that. It's easy to look up. But I know if it's below 200, it's not a good sign if your T cells are low. And that, I think, is what I'm going to say about the whole immune system and antibodies. And the best thing we can do is good sleep, good diet, good mental, positive. All those things help our health so much, and they're so contingent, or the immune system is so contingent on those. And good health practices, the two added to it. Uh-huh.
Could you do the three again, the cavity sarcoma and the kinesis, what was the third thing?
And pneumocystic pneumonia.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, they will be anemic, they've got night sweats, they've got other things, but a lot of people have illnesses like that. All right, now let me just start. I was give you a break, but I'm not going to at this moment. You can just wish you had one. Let's go on and start and I will break in just a minute. Start the endocrine system. And what I want to do, and I've got two little stories, and we'll break before those, but let me get the academic part kind of out of the way, and the stories make better sense. So stay with me, though. Stay with me. And you all who've seen the YouTube, or not, whatever it is. Yeah, is it YouTube? Correct me if or add to it. The pituitary, the hypothalamus is at the brain, and it's the size of a plum, I think it is. Prune, I believe. And it's the master, it's the center, it's the, how can we say any organ is a master organ? But it's got the richest blood supply in the body. And what it amounts to is all our blood goes up to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is our detector. It's our computer. She is low in cobalt or iron, and I've got to do something about it, and alerts the part of the body and the organs that can help that out. It's just I think the immune system's fabulous, but the endocrine system is just as fabulous. So here's the hypothalamus, the size of a prune, we'll say. And then you've got a stalk that stretches down, and right below the stalk is the pituitary. And the pituitary is as big as your eraser on your pencil, or the size of a black-eyed pea. and what that little pituitary can do. And if that isn't enough to imagine, it's broken up into a front and a back and distinguished. So it's two organs. Here's this little eraser, and I'm going to break it in two because things come off the front and they don't have anything to do with what comes off the back. And actually, everything that comes off the front doesn't have anything to do with each other. This blows me away. And so, here's the pituitary. And I read this, now students get grossed out, but they say if you put your finger in your nose and go as high as you can, there's where the pituitary is. And it is so protected. And that is, to me, a beautiful thing, that we're so protected with that little tiny organ. So the easiest to talk about is the back. And I can tell you the names, but you don't need it. It's neurohypophysis. The pituitary's other name is hypophysis. And the back is called neurohypophysis. And the front is adenohypophysis. So the back has to do with two hormones. And they are Pitocin, which helps us with lactation, women. Pitocin. And the other one's anti-diuretic hormone. So, and anti-diuretic hormone. So here's the hypophysis, the stalk, and there's that little pituitary. And so the half in two, we've got Pitocin for lactation and anti-diuretic hormone. Now the interesting thing is anti-diuretic hormone and maybe Pitocin both, I can't remember, are made in the hypothalamus, and they just come down to the stalk and stay, and she can't hear me, I guess, Liz. And they stay in, but it's on their tape. They stay in the posterior. So here are two listen to the words, anti-diuretic. So you and I do not want a one specific gravity in our urine because that's water. We want our urine to have some weight because it's taking waste out. So it's that anti-diuretic hormone that keeps our urine at the right specific gravity. If it's too concentrated, then you have to stop and say, does it block anti or release anti? You have to talk to yourself. You know, you just say the word. If my urine, let's do it. If my urine, well, let's take beers. Everybody urinates if you drink a lot of beer. I don't drink beer, but that's what I've noticed. A lot of urinating. So that blocks, does it? No, that releases the anti. You have to think it out to do the opposite. It's a crazy thing to think. Caffeine makes you urinate, so it releases the, did I say it right? Yeah, you have to think it out, but you get the drift. And we've got that wonderful hormone that's made in the hypothalamus, comes down. Okay, then the front is another story. We've got about 7 hormones. Hormones coming out of the front of that little thing. And so we've got, I'm going to say right here, the gonad, G-O-N-A, the gonads, which are our sexual hormones, gonadotropic hormones. And they're what keeps our sexual organs viable. And the gonadotropic hormones are prolactin and, help me. Huh? Do what?
Luteinizing.
Yeah, luteinizing hormone, which helps sexual, and then, one more that I want. Luteinizing, prolactin, follicle stimulating. Yes, yes, yes. Follicle stimulating, you don't have to keep them distinguished. What they all do is help us with our sexual organs and keeping them viable. In men, there's the testosterone, I'll get to that, but there's also another one called anti-sexual hormone, but they're the gonadotrophics, they're helping in our sexual aspect. Then we've got thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. And the thyroid, we've already, the butterfly up here, and it produces, we've already mentioned a little bit of this, but let me just bring it up again. T3, I told you all, don't even try to remember the difference in T3 and T4. They help our metabolism. And this one's the one that I told you, calcitonin. Remember that one? That, just to remind you, calcitonin, this is thyroid. 3 things are produced. And calcitonin is the one we've already talked about, but it's the one that when the hypothalamus sees too much calcium in our blood, it sends a notice down to the thyroid. Listen, you've got to take up this, it's too much calcium in the bloodstream. So calcitonin shoots out and takes our calcium and puts it in our bones and teeth, the extras. And that's why elderly, and I know we've already talked about it, the elderly sometimes are given calcium, Tums, or anything else, but along with Iridia, it's in your drugs. Iridia is calcitonin. And so if I give you a heavy amount of calcium and Iridia or calcitonin, it's going to put it in my bones and I won't get osteo. Thank you. Osteopenia. Anyway, so, and do you remember that's not coming from, well, I'm not, it's a parathyroid hormone put on here. I will put it there because we got to. You remember when the hypothalamus reads out your load, that you're low in calcium, then it tells the parathyroid, the 2 raisin size on each side of our thyroid, parathyroid, the 2, and the hypothalamus tells the parathyroid, shoot out that hormone and take calcium out of bones and teeth. And if they're pregnant, take it from their hair, take it from everything to get your bone level up. So, there is that. Now, melanocyte stimulating hormone is our pigmentation, melanocyte. And again, this is all on that film too, that'll maybe a little better presented. So melanocyte is our pigmentation. I think ACTH is our last one. Does anybody remember? I think it is because I'm doing it from memory, but I think it's the last one. Adrenal corticotrophic hormone, adrenal. Now, it's not through because you've got your kidneys, and sitting on top of the kidneys are little caps, and those caps are your adrenal glands. Adrenocortico. Cortico means covering. So it's the cover. Okay, we're really breaking down that word. Adrenocorticotrophic growth hormone. So, and remember, I think I've already mentioned that they may live together, but it's just like a high rise.
Nobody has to speak to anybody, and it doesn't. The cortex doesn't speak to the inside of the adrenal. The adrenals has nothing to do with the kidneys, so they're just a place to live. So inside, just not necessarily dealing with the endocrine system, but inside is anything inside is a medulla, and inside is epinephrine and norepinephrine, which help us with flight and fight and slowing down and increasing. That's just a sidebar. The medulla really isn't involved in our endocrine system so much. The cortex is. The cortex, we have a hormone that has to do with the cortex. And so that's your famous salt, sex, and salt, sex, and sugar. But there's a more sophisticated presentation of salt, sex, and sugar. Sugar is they're what's secreted just off the cortex. And that's your steroids, cortisone. So your steroids, corticosteroids, steroids off the cortex, corticosteroids. So that's sugar. You remember, steroids cause hyperglycemia. So the cortex will produce cortisol, and that's the sugar association. Also, off the cortex is aldosterone, which has to, if you remember the drug aldosterone, it deals with water. And so, salt. It keeps our body, we have several places in the body that tries to keep our fluids. We just already talked about ADH that tries to keep the fluids. Well, aldosterone or the cortex tries to keep our fluids. Our kidneys try to keep our fluids. A lot of areas try to keep our fluids at bay. Then sex is androgens, our sexual. So we're not through with sexual hormones up there with the gonadotrophic. Sometimes I've read that androgens are just male, but now they're using the term for male and female sexual hormones. So that cortex has to do with those three secretions, but ADH is the direct relationship with the brain, the hypothalamus, the pituitary. Now, with that being said, let's take a little break, and now I think the things I tell you make more sense. So, Liz, I'm sorry I'm going over to the